blessed 4th of July. We are packing everything up, ready to head to the farm when the radio show's over. So welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Friday, July the 4th, 2025. And we hope that everybody's going to have some awesome family activities. Be safe. Susan, I liked your drawing, your mad dash that you put on Facebook. Oh, Michael disappeared. There he is. Hi, Michael.
Hey, sweetheart. I come in and then you froze up. You were gone.
Well, we have Melissa and Susan with us.
Well, welcome. How are you, ladies? Anything exciting happening in your world?
Always.
Well, share with us.
Oh, hello, Melissa. Hello, Jeannie. Hello, Michael. Big
Hi.
hug over the ozone.
I've been wondering how things are going with your grandson.
Well, I told Dr. Tim on Tim Hayes part of the show. My daughter was very enthusiastic about doing an exorcism.
Right.
She said she didn't know much about that, and so I got to work and went online and found, among many things, a very lovely, scholarly, sympathetic video on how one could, all the biblical references that mention, places that mention exorcisms. This man had done a lot of research, so it was wonderful to have it all distilled. So I sent it to my daughter, and I got an absolute thundergram from her yesterday afternoon. It turns out she's on sabbatical and has turned her own iPhone into the cathedral office. And there's another number on which we are supposed to communicate with her. And somehow I sent this video to the other number, and it went right to the assisting priest, all about exorcism. He didn't say much on it, and he probably doesn't know who I am because my last name is different. But she just was so angry with me. She said, "Why don't you honor my boundaries and do what I ask?" And she went into a tirade that was reminiscent of the 25 years in which she was basically not in any kind of real communication. It was tacit reports of, "Oh, I'm okay, the kids are okay, thanks for calling by," type of thing. So I apologized, and I was horrified, and I right away took off that number from my phone and said, "Okay, you're safe, because I'll just type it back in when you're back off the sabbatical." But she also said some different things. She said, "Mom, I'm a priest. I know about exorcism. I know all about it. You don't have to get in there and start trying to fix things. You're such a fixer," which is true. She said, "My son doesn't need an exorcism. He's an addict, and that's the demon." And I thought, well, that's exactly what they say about, exorcism. People who seem possessed are often addicts. But in any case, I listened to her, and thank God for the tools. I was just okay. And figuring we would settle down later. Well, about 2 hours later, she texted back. She said, "I feel bad." Those are her exact words. "I feel bad. I'm afraid I hurt your feelings. I am upset about Jacob. I'm terribly worried about Jacob," and blah, blah, blah. So I texted back and said, "First of all, I do profoundly apologize for sending that to your priest. That was totally unintentional. But I am confused because you seemed so willing and interested in doing an exorcism the night before. So we talked for a while, and she said, no, I think you've just got to keep up the prayers. And I've had to block him again because he contacted me because he needs his wisdom teeth out. And why hadn't I seen to that? Mother, why hadn't I gotten that done for him years ago? And she wrote back, saying, you're an adult. It's been 7 years that you've been an adult, and you have insurance coverage, and it includes dental. You don't need to yell at me. And so I'm going to block you again until this sort of thing stops. So that's it. And I'm kind of relieved that we're not going to, because doing a real exorcism means going into a period of fasting, a kind of saying certain prayers, and I don't know what all else it means. But anyway, that's the latest report on that. And I know that Susan had suggested I do a wake-up sheet. And I started one, and I went right to because my goal, of course, is to have him well. And of course, that goal isn't pressing on my well-being directly most of the time. I can certainly go there and feel very sorry about what's happening to him. And I'm not arguing with that. I don't even want to not be sorry for him. I think that's appropriate. I don't feel as if, maybe I'm fooling myself, but I don't think a wake-up sheet, because I'm not crippled emotionally. I feel great joy in my life, more than ever before in my life, and I'm still doing that, even with him not being well. And so I'm glad we didn't try to do it yesterday. I think the talk with Melissa was much more the way to go, and I thank her very much for all that. Okay, over and out.
Well, my first piece of feedback would be to remind you that, of course, she's not angry with you, never has been angry with you, but she's got anger issues. And isn't it shocking that her son, and likely she is in there as a power person with him, has anger issues? And when the stress is up and the chips are down, he turns to the thing that he hated most that his power person did to him. Now, I understand that, his father did that. But it sounds like, Mom might have gotten in on that act as well. And it sounds like you stepped into, based in our conversation yesterday, or reflected in our conversation yesterday, it sounds like you stepped into playing John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And bring that up for her. Now, the challenge would be, would you feel, one, led to, is it your job? And two, would you feel comfortable approaching her and saying, one of the things I noticed that your son does is when the stress is up and the chips are down, he turns to anger. And I noticed that yesterday you did that too. Now, there's an understanding of these dynamics that can be healed in a family, but it's going to take some work and some ownership. Now, that might cost you your head, so you'd have to be very careful in what you choose to say and what you choose to do. But my offering would be, one of the greatest gifts, if someone in the world were able to give it to her, would be to look at this anger that's unresolved for her, that leads her to do behaviors that she regrets. And, it was pretty fast that she turned around and apologized for it. But at the same time, it is her opportunity to learn forgiveness. And that may be the opening that creates the opening and the healing for Jacob too. Or it will, I guarantee, if at least be part of the opening that could lead to Jacob shifting his mind. When you'll remember, I've talked about the Global Science Conference I used to keynote at, and Marcel Vogel came, and he's got this camera with which he takes a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. So in order for us to think about something, express something, it has to be an energy that's in us. So
Yeah.
I'll play the role of your daughter at this point, and I'm all even, and I'm a priest, and I'm about love, and everything's wonderful. But somebody violates one of my goals, and my stress goes up, and my stress goes up, and I look back in my mind, and I look at what my power person did that I hated the most, and it was anger.
Mm,
And so, not being sure what to do, I express that. I function out of what I hated having done to me.
mm,
The simple presence of that energy within anyone in your family system means that there's nothing we know in the so-called physical world that can stop the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. The presence of anger in a person means that they are constantly bombarding the world with an actual, literal, measurable energy wave based in thought disorders of anger
mm,
and sending that out into the world. And that, whether it's ever spoken, whether it ever comes to conscious awareness or not, is irrelevant. And so I suspect there might be, you being mom, there might be some power person dynamics in you that would be appropriate to do some worksheets around,
mm,
uh, dealing with times when maybe you were her power person expressing
mm,
from anger. I don't know if
mhm.
that ever happened, but
Right.
these generational patterns, if somebody in the loop says, I'm going to start to do this, I'm going to start to work on this. Now, I can certainly understand that it may not be appropriate to approach her with this whole thing. However, I do have another suggestion, and that is, and knowing that your power person, mom, expressed a lot of anger toward you as a kid, you
Mm,
might do worksheets for 4 generations here. You might sit down and start with a worksheet on your mom, as though you're your mom,
mm,
doing a worksheet from her point of view around a particular time you remember expressing that unreasonable anger, or actually, there's no such thing as reasonable anger, expressing anger toward you. And then, of course, doing your work around having received that anger, what did you want from mom? And then if you passed it on with your daughter, doing some worksheets, of course, as yourself and what was going on for you in that regard. And then perhaps even again, if it's not safe or um, you don't feel it's doable to invite her into doing it, then you might do the same thing of doing some worksheets as though you were her,
mm.
both in relationship to you, or maybe you weren't her power person with the anger. Maybe it was somebody else. I don't know. But there's a whole. Who was it that said, "Oh, what a web we weave"?
Yeah, I don't know.
When we first practice to deceive, and what's the deception? Well, I'm angry at you. Well, that's a total lie. I'm angry. I'm angry because there's anger in me. So
Mm,
when we start to create those deceptions, what kind of webs do we weave? And you being in the middle have a powerful, I think, role to play of bringing conscious, active, present love to the generational patterns on in all 4 generations, or maybe even going back before mom.
mm.
I'd
Oh,
certainly
yeah.
hold the space for that.
Okay, that's a wonderful suggestion. I can imagine framing out, I picture it as drawings almost. Uh, mm,
Well, that art being, one of your ways of expressing that might be powerful to let yourself tap into what it felt as a child to be the receiver of that, and do some art around that from your point of view, from mom's point of view, and then looking at that's a powerful way to heal. Open the space to embrace that.
yeah. Well, that's a great idea. I feel the juice of that assignment. Uh, you know, I've been gently going along with my relationship with my mother, the way you did with your dad. And I'm having these little breakthroughs. I don't know if they're little or not, but there was a time when my mother, she never showed soft or sad feelings to us. It was always cheerful or rage or practical stuff, which wasn't an emotion at all. But there was one time when I was 6 and I found her crying in the downstairs bathroom. I've talked about this. And instead of being terrified that she was crying and feeling how much she didn't want us to see that she was crying, I fell right in line and pretended I didn't notice and went off to school, not daring to look at her except a glance to just check and see this phenomenon of my mother crying. I had this fantasy the other night about going into the bathroom where she was facing out a window and putting my arms around her and saying, "Mom, you're so sad. What's the matter?" This has never even, I mean, such a simple thing, Michael, but it never
It's
had
powerful.
occurred to me that I could do that and that she would receive my love for her and tell me things that she never would tell us. And
You can still do that.
yeah, doing it. I've been having, when I go for walks, I talk to myself. Luckily, we have iPhones where people can talk to other people with hearing devices in. So if you see someone talking, you no longer think they're
You think they're on the
schizophrenic.
phone.
So I'm letting people, I hold my phone and I let people think that I'm talking on the phone, but I'm really talking to my mother in my mind. So check me into the insane asylum. Yeah, it's been so far so good.
Is Jonathan there now?
No, he has moved.
Oh, okay, he's gone.
He's
You had spoken about him coming back at some point, so I didn't know if he was there now. And
no,
so
he
that
got
means
a
Charlie's gone too?
Charlie has gone to Sacramento. He's doing an internship, and Jonathan he got sick when he was going to come up, and so he didn't come. He sent his son in his stead, and the son showed up. I think I texted you right then. Says Charlie showed up right now. I'm not on the show
Right.
today. He showed up, and we had a very nice time with him. And I was glad Jonathan didn't push himself to come up. We're in pretty good touch, but he has been sick a lot. He's been in bed with all kinds of complaints, headaches, a hurt back. I know about backs. He did a lot of moving of boxes, but also a stomach bug showed up, and he's going in tomorrow for blood work because they have a lot of ticks around there, and he has found ticks on himself many times, sometimes embedded. So he thinks he might have Lyme disease. So anyway, he's going through all this stuff, and we're in good touch. But no, he did not come up.
Well, the reason I was asking, and you could perhaps even do it with him on Zoom, is share with him that event with your mom and how you avoided it, but you'd like support in being able to really express what's in your heart toward her now, and ask him if he would be the surrogate to play her role. And that might be a powerful opening for him, just imagining being your mom in sadness, in tears, and holding that space and being there for you to fully express. And you might find yourself expressing some things ostensibly to your mother, but really to Jonathan as well.
I don't understand. I understand what you're suggesting. I don't understand why he would be a good surrogate. As if we had problems, he and I, or we need to fix something between him and me. I don't understand.
No, my thought was that, you've talked about some of the things that have happened with mom,
Yeah,
and I hear some similarity with some of what Jonathan's been through
with
and with his challenges.
Oh, just with depression and
Personal.
anxiety and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, oftentimes issues like that skip a generation. And it just occurs to me that that might be a space that opens something new for him in the way of healing
Oh, I see. You mean
by
his
playing
sorrow
that. Yeah,
and might be like my mother's?
it might be your mother's,
Oh
but
man.
just sharing the whole
Mm.
scenario with him from when you
Hmm.
were 6 and saying, there isn't anybody that I really feel comfortable with or whatever. And I wonder if you would be the surrogate, take on mom's role. Here's what was going on for her, as far as I know. Here are the kinds of things that were happening. You know, I don't know if he knows about the belt coming out and those sorts of things, but it might be a space to share that, asking him to be the surrogate and see what opens when you fully express how you are now in touch with your own being and can extend that to her vicariously through him.
I'll have to think about that. It doesn't strike me as eh, a good match or something. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel right yet, but it
Oh,
might.
well, your intuition is the best guide for there for sure. But there might be someone there that you can ask if it's not appropriate to do it with him. And, the reason I suggested that is the sense that perhaps he was the recipient of some of mom's unexpressed energy. But
You
perhaps there's
mean
someone.
that I was getting mad at him? Is
No,
that?
no, 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 nothing to do with you and he.
Hmm.
Just that what my sense was looking, of course, you're wanting to deal with this whole thing with the family, but that it might be a way, if he is the inheritor of some of mom's depressive dynamics,
Mm.
this might be a way to open that for him,
Oh, I see.
in a way that otherwise he's not been able to look at.
It never occurred to me that my mother's depression might have passed on to him because Tim Bingham was the presenting depressed person in the house. And Jonathan often talks about being a little boy with a father that he tried to heal and tried to fix and tried to understand, and how he just became afraid of the idea of being a grown up, even, and going to work because he saw his dad in such a state before he was off to work. He would go to work and sort of use his work as a way of postponing feeling depressed. He dove into his work. He was good at it. So
Right,
he'd go into it, and then he'd come home exhausted and sometimes panicked because there are situations in law firms that are stressful. And
right,
Jonathan would once again see his dad in a bad way, and John developed the idea that if you go to work out there, you're going to suffer. And that was a very big issue with him being a doctor.
right.
And I think why he finally left is he never could let go of the association of work with depression and anxiety.
Mm.
So anyway, so that's a very creative new idea that my mother's stuff was going down to him too, and we never, any of us had that thought before.
Well, one of the things that they're showing is that people who experience certain forms of trauma within their family system or within the culture, things like war and such,
Hmm.
that literally their chemistry, their genes are altered by that.
I've heard that.
And oftentimes, like alcoholism it's pretty clearly known that sometimes, it skips a generation and, there's the addiction back again a generation
Yeah.
later. And I think that things like depression fit in the same energetic category.
Mm.
And if nothing else, and that may be totally off base, but if nothing else, giving Jonathan the opportunity to just really be there with you while you open up this experience from a 6-year-old would be powerful for both of you.
Mm. Jeannie wrote in the chat, I just saw maybe her former husband. You're talking about my daughter, I think. And yes, my daughter married a very, very angry man that I introduced her to. And I wondered, what was that going on? Well, he totally fooled us. But why even then? Why was the attraction there? I mean, that's a whole other thing. And I think my daughter does, when she goes into upset, she becomes a lot like that former husband with a hardness she never had before she met him. And I think she recognizes that, and I recognize it. And it's still in her system, I think.
He's probably a power person for her.
Her husband, yeah, totally. In fact,
Yeah.
Jacob didn't get her ire, I don't think ever. She was the breadwinner, was not home. It was Jacob's father who was the angry one. And Catherine came home and was terrified of her husband too. She was like another child in the house. Here she's powerful dean of a cathedral out there and comes home and is scared of her husband. So, yeah, Dee
Yeah. Again, the reminder, no, she was never, ever in her whole life scared of her husband, but she had fear, and her husband could certainly bring it up. Remember, we make up out of the mind takes, according to the lab stats, 200 to 500 milliseconds to create a story about
Wow.
why this energy is moving in me.
Mm-hmm.
And story, because virtually every one of us was raised, as you've heard me say many times, as card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame. The story
Such a mouthful, Michael.
usually
You ought to give it initials and just say VACBOL. And
no, actually, I like to expand it into the one world universal religion of blame, guilt, fault, shame, and suffering.
okay, carry on. That's as long as you can get your mouth around it. Whew.
And so when you recognize that perception, this construct in my mind, again, according to lab stats, it's delayed 200 to 500 milliseconds. My mind, according to what's resonated in me by what's going on in the world, massages the energies resonated in me into a literal picture painted on the inside of my eyeballs that I see. And it's a picture of someone else. And that's where I come to the belief that they make me this way. When I collapse that, I've at least temporarily eradicated the lie and have the opportunity to directly confront and process through, if I'm holding to the presence of love, whatever that underlying energy is that's been massaged into my brain's image of someone else.
But Michael, a baby isn't, well, maybe they are. Maybe they carry it from previous lives or from their ancestors in their DNA. But a baby doesn't have that rage as its basic nature. It is introduced to the phenomenon of that rage by some person, a power person figured. And what you're saying makes me, suddenly I understand more why I was so terrified of my daughter's husband. As soon as he went into his rageful self, which was like an alchemical change of personality to the point
Right.
where terror, I felt
He became
terror.
his power person.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing because, well, it is amazing because he had a gentle dad and a gentle mom. So I don't know where that came from, but anyway, we don't have to try to track it down, whatever it was.
It only takes once.
Wow.
It only takes once when the stress is up and the chips are down. Now, oftentimes people develop a persona of the gentle person, the caring person out of
Mm,
an abused situation.
mm,
And depending how deeply they've dissociated from a traumatic experience, we call that a true multiple personality.
oh, mm,
And, so we've got people that they define this as a true multiple. But the truth is, I've never met anybody who doesn't have a power person.
yeah.
And
Okay.
all that needs to happen is that the power person has more power over the child. It's usually a child, again, not, I suspect in your daughter's case with her husband, this is the dynamic. It is not always a parent and a child, but usually. But all it takes is one event where the parent has the power.
Mm,
Parent is not functioning out of love, maybe functioning out of terror of the other partner,
mm,
and the child perceiving it as survival. Bingo, there's a power person, and there's an alternative personality that when the stress is up and the chips are down, one turns to for survival.
mm,
And it's forgiveness that dissolves that personality. It's forgiveness that allows the access to those underlying energetic patterns, bring them forward. They come forward all the time, but they come forward for the average person as a lie because people tell themselves the lie, you made me mad, you hurt me.
mhm,
So when I tell my mind that that person over there hurt me, my mind, being the obedient evidential device that it is, has to select a max of 9 bits of data and build a picture about how that person is the one who's causing this hurt in me.
mm,
So I take the hurt and I massage it into a picture of somebody else. Now I'm living in a lie.
mm,
And to me, there's where the power of forgiveness comes in because it's our lies that cause our pain, our diseases, our depression, our fear, our guilt. It's our lies that do that. When one cancels the goal and collapses the lie and stays conscious as that lie, as that construct collapses in on itself, they now, instead of having access only to the lie, which is where most people live, that's all they ever get to see, in the space of actual forgiveness, as Yeshua taught it, canceling the goal that's driving the mind to tell
mm,
that lie collapses. And now I get to move back into direct relationship with the root energy of that experience. And if I go there and I bring with me, as in step 4, conscious active present love, then the underlying energetic dynamic might be 10 generations old or come from anywhere along the way,
mm.
and it dissolves. I'm able to process that directly rather than have to tell myself a story and try to fix the story. There are a lot of therapies out there that are working within the story, within the constructs
Yeah,
of the mind.
right.
But what we're looking to do is to bypass that, because if I'm working within the constructs of my mind, I'm working within, literally, demonstrably in the laboratory, something that's at least 200 milliseconds old,
Mm,
probably based on something far, far, far in the past from that.
mm,
But when I can collapse that in the instant and come back into direct relationship. I'm not processing through the story anymore. I'm directly embracing this energy of terror or rage or hatred or vengeance or whatever it is. I'm from a space of being, from a space of active love, embracing and dissolving. And that's when one does that, that's when one doesn't have a need for chemical depressants, suppressants, or all of those things. One literally transmutes the energy that created the pain or the depression in the first place and stand in a state of healing.
You know, I've always thought that you have to know stuff about your past in order to forgive the past. And you've said over and over, you don't need to know
The number
facts,
one pseudo solution of the non-being mind, if I could just figure this out, if I could
including
just know
know
what
stuff.
happened, and that's
Yeah.
the booby prize.
So to do the different thing, you begin by taking responsibility, not knowing anything. You just say, this is my anger. This is
Right.
my sadness. This is, and I am responsible for this. If you
Yeah.
just say that much, but then the next step, what's the next step?
So the next step is once I've this is up for me, and having been indoctrinated and being a very devout member of that one world universal religion of guilt, fault, blame, shame, and suffering, I stop and I go, oh, but I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. This is probably mine. But how do I get to it? How do I do that?
Yeah.
Well, I was just interacting with Harry over there. And Harry gave me a look just like my great uncle used to look when he was about to turn and beat my aunt I hated him for it.
Mm.
And so once I identify that that's the goal that's driving my pained perception that holds this hatred around what my mind told me was around what my uncle was doing to my aunt. When I recognize that's the goal and I cancel it, then that goal being the driver for this construct, this perception, the whole perception collapses. And it's not a very nice image, but we're all very familiar with how the 9/11 towers went down and they collapsed into their own footprint. If you think of perception as the 9/11 tower, and you cancel the goal and that thing collapses into its own footprint, now I have direct access to my own unconscious dynamic.
But Michael, you used an example that's concrete, the uncle and the
Right,
aunt.
right.
And I'm asking, what if you don't have an uncle and aunt? What if there's nobody out there? Just the footprint is available, just the towers that can come down without any example in your life that you know of.
Okay, so then, but there's something going on. You are in a situation, you're by yourself, you're with someone else, you just interacted with someone, somebody, you just made a phone call and flubbed by leaving a video behind. Something happened.
Mm-hmm.
What's the goal that's driving my pain perception around this? So using the example you started out with, oh my God, what have I done? What light have I put her in by saying this video? And so what's my goal for myself? Well, gee, I wish I'd known that that was the wrong number. There's the goal driving my perception. I cancel that.
Mm-hmm.
And this construct of guilt at perhaps having gotten my daughter, made her look bad or gotten her in trouble or, whatever the dynamic was there. That whole thing now collapses, and I get to drop into the underlying part of my mind that's in need of healing, the part that's probably been going on in the family system for 1,000 generations. So Yeshua would not say to you, well, just forgive yourself for sending that video. Yeshua would say, forgive as to yourself, having made the mistake of sending that video. And what would that look like? That would look like me recognizing that whatever my pain or upset or disturbance, whatever word I want to use to describe it, is around this now interaction with my daughter, who's pointing her anger at me. What's the goal that I'm holding? And now I'm going to forgive as to myself and self-blame or guilt or, whatever the dynamic is. But whatever it is, in the moment where there's a construct in the mind that's made up of some sort of pain, that construct, absolutely, totally, completely, 10,000% guaranteed, is at least 200 milliseconds old. In other words, it's from the past.
Mm.
I can be buried by that past. When that man that tapped into Yeshua's work, he's like, hey man, this is good, I'm going to come do it, but first I have to go bury my mother and my father. And Yeshua said, let the blind lead the blind, let the dead bury the dead. Saying, if you're going to live in a past, even if it's not based in 10 generations of genetics, it's only 200 milliseconds old. It's a past, and you're letting it bury you. So Yeshua would
That's a
say,
good example.
forgive as to. He doesn't ever say to forgive anyone, but forgive as to what has come up in you. How do I do that? I have a goal that's driving this whole process that's going on inside of me. And it's formulated. It took at least 200 milliseconds for my mind to, well, how are we going to fabricate this? What's going to look like? What data are we going to use? I'm going to filter out from 10,000 brain cells firing 9 bits of data. And now look, now I know the truth of the situation. It's nothing but a fabrication in the mind.
Mm.
Collapse it by canceling the goal. Embrace, and go back to the statement you've heard me say, one of my favorites, 1,000 times you've heard me say it, from Carl Jung: until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. So what do I need to become conscious of? What's in me in that worksheet where I flubbed and sent the video to the wrong number? That brings up something untoward in me, something unlike love in me. And it will be shown to me, as long as I don't mesmerized and lost in the appearance my mind is showing. Remember, I said, don't judge by appearances. My mind takes this 200 milliseconds to make up an appearance. So I got a story. Wait a minute, I got a story. It's about juju. And so it says, don't judge by appearances. Collapse those suckers. Get rid of them. Let yourself drop into what's underneath it. And now you get to heal. Now there is a mechanism in you that was given to you at the moment of your birth. You took a breath, and that breath belongs not only to you, but to God. And you watch people in the moment where they get that phone call, oh, you sent that video, oh, I'm so angry. What are they doing? They're holding their breath. They're denying the presence of the only thing that will heal them in that instant. That's why there's a reminder in the worksheet over and over to breathe, especially at germane points where most people aren't breathing. And of course, we have this wonderful thing of matching bags of garbage. So, now my daughter has an opportunity to move into another level of adulthood and own the anger that she probably, as a priest, goes, no, no, not me. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And gets to heal that as you get to heal whatever was going on for you, the guilt or the fear or whatever, that there may be some damage done. At least that's the sense I had of it. So each person involved in every interaction, if that interaction is based in something other than conscious active present love, has an opportunity to heal that part of their minds and recognize that, especially where a power person dynamic is involved, a power person dynamic is a strong energy, and perception is structure. When somebody allows a power person dynamic, which by definition, love was not present, so it is literally a disease. When someone allows, and the last thing most everybody wants to do is face the power person dynamic in their lives, because it's usually based in horrendous pain. That's why we were given another level of requirement with our parents, that we wasn't to have rock before them, but it was to honor them, bring love into behavior toward them, takes everything to the next level. And each person involved has an opportunity to engage in dropping into, what my description of what happened when you spoke to your daughter and anger was there, is there was something painful under the surface that either exposed or could have exposed that action, and her anger is her drug, her anesthetic for shutting that down.
Yeah.
And again, you may choose to talk to her about that, which might mean you'll lose your head, or you may choose to just hold the space and maybe do the worksheet as her, or do whatever your work is around it, and hold the space to open. Is that all fitting? Is that all making sense?
It's making sense. For a moment, you were talking about, my having used the wrong number to send that video. And I thought you were saying that on some level I did it on purpose to get even with her or punish her.
Oh, no, I never had that thought.
Well, it crossed my mind. And then I thought, no, that isn't, but it crossed my mind. And I thought, did I do
Right.
something unconsciously to hurt her? I don't think so. I was so excited, and she uses the same name, her cell phone, both those numbers are the same
Right.
name. And so anyway, I just went through my mind, and I wanted to make sure you didn't mean that. And I'm glad to hear
No, I
you
hadn't.
didn't.
That thought never came into awareness of in any way. My take with you, Susan, with the work you've done, is you're pretty conscious about being there and being in integrity for people.
Thanks. I'm hoping so. I'm working on it. And I am, it's, as you say, layers. We're going to another level or layer. And at first I thought, oh my God, how many layers? I mean, it's like Princess and the Pea. The pea is under there, and you add a layer and layer, and you can still feel the pea. But in a way, PEA. So, to
You need to
clarify.
be.
So, but I think that's true. I don't think Carl Jung ever thought that we would become enlightened once and for all. I think he thought that we reveal the shadow self to ourselves more and more and more, and thereby take responsibility and become more and more whole, but it never finishes while we're in a body on the planet.
Well, my take is that we are not designed to have an unconscious mind. And I believe that we can achieve, not saying I have or that I know anybody who has, we can achieve living in the space where we freed ourselves from the unconscious. Big task, big job when you
Yeah.
realize, in just 30 generations, there are 1.6 billion people in there. What
Come
kind of
in.
unresolved?
Hang on, I'm gonna mute you. I'm gonna mute myself. Oh, look. I'm gonna mute myself, but I'm still listening, Michael. Keep talking.
Okay. So my take is that the ultimate objective, if you go to Yeshua in Revelations, he says, to he that overcomes, to she that overcomes, that there is a space that we can end up with as that. And there are a number of promises that go with it. The first one is, shall not taste of the second death. The first death is when we lose awareness of ourselves as love and buy into a false personality. That's the dead burying the dead that Yeshua was talking about. Those who live with no awareness of themselves as love, but rather are this persona. So shall not taste of the second death, which is, I would say, offers the death of the body. They shall become a pillar in the temple being our own human form, a pillar being a fixture, a pillar being something solid, eternal. Because the next step says, and shall go out no more. I think we get to kill as many bodies as we need to until we finally wake up to who we are and choose to face and free ourselves, forgive everything in literally our minds and bodies, which includes our genes, that is out of harmony with love, till we reclaim our human lives. It's what we're here to do. And, it's a process that opens piece by piece by piece as one does their work. And this particular weekend is one where the celebration is one of stepping into liberty. And people talk about liberty out there in the world, political liberty and such. But I don't think anyone ever gets political liberty until they do their work and gets liberty from their own unconscious dynamics. So I'll put out there the hope and holding the space that each and every one of us in this celebration of liberty advances forward in freeing ourselves in achieving liberty from every form of hostility, fear, every form of power person dynamic. And again, when you recognize that perception is structure, perception based in a power person dynamic, by definition, is not based in love. That perception is a reflection of structure. Most people don't want to go there and look at it, but the beauty or the benefit of going there and looking at it is you get to enter into the structure that is distorted and diseased by that energetic dynamic. I mean, literally on a cellular level. And you get to reach into the cell and you snatch out the distorting, disease-causing energy. And you become free of it. There's the liberty. There is no freedom in the world. There's always responsibility. But there is liberty. And liberty means that we have the ability to choose to do anything we choose to do. And then, because there is no freedom, there's liberty, we get to be responsible for the result. And we do that individually and collectively. But if one finds themselves living out of a power person dynamic over and over and over again, when the stress is up and the chips are down, do you deliver the same message to life? The same pained message that you think, if I could just control you doing that, then I wouldn't have to feel this? Then forgive as to that structural disease that reflects as a power person dynamic, a perception based in the power person dynamic. And as you do that, you free yourself literally of your physical diseases, so-called physical diseases. Which people say, well, Michael, that's ridiculous. How could you do that? Well, here's how you do it. You have to start with the truth. What's the truth? Well, there'll be people who'll tell you they know better, but I'm going to go with Einstein. He's got the mind that I trust a whole lot more than most everybody out there. And he says, on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. You do not have a material body. Therefore, you do not have a material disease. There is no material disease. But there is an appearance, perception, created by the mind of something solid. It's not true. We know it's not true. We know it's not solid. It appears so. So if real healing, if actual healing is going to occur, one's going to have to step into actual truth and start to deal with things on that level. And in my awareness, there is, in all the study and work I've done over the last half century plus, there's nobody on the planet that put it together like Yeshua did. It doesn't exist anywhere. And there'll be many who, when they're told what it is and what needs to be done, that will say, too hard to say, who can hear it, and they'll leave. Just like they did with him 2,000 years ago. And they'll make up stories and call his name, and he'll say, why do you call my name? Why do you call me? He says, Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I told you to do. Stop kidding yourself. There's a work to be done. And my take is that it leads each and every one of us to the ultimate aim of the creation, which is recovering the truth of who we are as human beings, recovering the forgotten self. I was talking with someone yesterday, and they had a very strong religious orientation. They were talking about the fallen self. It's like, no, it's not the fallen self that needs repair. It's the forgotten self that needs to be reclaimed. And you have to reclaim it from what's in your own mind. And you were given at the instant of your first breath the grace to do that. Grace has been kept something mysterious. It's really quite simple. It's the ability to change your mind anytime you want. So here, holding the space and joining you in that. Delighted that you're with us, and have a wondrous